Chiefs news, analysis, and opinion every day. The Kansas City Chiefs went out and signed a bevy of talent on the defensive line for the practice squad, and I think Zacch Pickens is one of the players that might find himself on the 53-man roster. There is a video from this talent haul of Broderick Martin already on the channel. Ethan Downs and Tyreek Smith will have videos as well, so if you are interested in that, be sure to stay tuned. But Zacch Pickens is the subject of this video, and you are looking on your screen right now at an impressive RAS score for Zacch Pickens. Who is Zacch Pickens, the defensive tackle out of South Carolina, picked 64th overall in the 2023 draft? And you might be thinking to yourself, 64th overall in the 2023 NFL draft, wouldn't that have been the Kansas City Chiefs? Well, remember, that was the year that the Dolphins had to forfeit their first-round pick. But also, the Chiefs in that draft traded up from their 63rd overall selection to take Rashee Rice, a player who will be notably absent from 6 games this season. But if you're looking at that RAS score and it doesn't make any sense to you why this guy is on the practice squad immediately after the 2023 draft from the Chicago Bears, I think things just didn't work out there, and we will look at the Bears' defensive tackle position in this video as well, because you might think to yourself, okay, well, if he was cut from the Bears, what are the odds that he's any good? Well, it could be pretty good. He has 34 3/8 inch arms, 10 3/8 inch hands, 6'3" 7/10", basically a 6'4" defensive tackle. A 6'4" defensive tackle with 34+ inch arms means that the passing lanes can be obstructed. 291 pounds coming out. I believe he plays closer to 294, 295 pounds now. 22 reps on the bench press is not a good number, but he's more than just a big body at the defensive tackle position, and you can figure that by looking at all of those green boxes on your screen. A 30.5 inch vert, a 9'8" broad jump, a very good number there, a 4.89 40-yard dash with a 1.67 10-yard split. A short shuttle number of 4.62 is no slouch, but we will get into a defensive tackle for the Chiefs a little bit later who has a very impressive short shuttle and a 3-cone drill of 7.45. You're looking at an RAS score of 9.23. Definitely someone who has the tools to be a starter in the NFL. He will start his Kansas City journey on the practice squad. I don't know that he's going to last there for very long. He has not shown terribly much propensity towards being productive in the NFL through 2 seasons, but I do think that part of that could just be the defensive scheme. Also, when you're lining up next to players that are not Chris Jones, life is a little bit harder in the NFL. So, this is Jerry Tillery, a guy that I have short sold on the channel, but this is the player with whom you are in direct competition for that active roster, I think, if you are Zacch Pickens. But a 9.72 RAS score and some very impressive numbers. Again, all of the tools that you would need to start in the NFL. And Jerry Tillery, we're going to see later, has some very good seasons in the NFL. I have short sold Jerry Tillery kind of based on his previous season in the NFL. Maybe Jerry Tillery can bounce back and be his former self lining up next to Chris Jones. We saw a lot of garbage time from the defensive line in general during the preseason, and you have to wonder if maybe that's why Mike Pennel was ultimately let go. He was touted as the starting defensive tackle next to Chris Jones, and it kind of made sense because he's a very stout run stuffer. But it's worth remembering that all of that garbage time from this defensive line group in the preseason, well, the starting run for those defensive tackles included Mike Pennel. Maybe he was just trying to get through the preseason injury-free, but it did not do him any favors as it seems. Jerry Tillery, on the other hand, looked very competent in the preseason, and he is ultimately on the 53-man roster for the Chiefs. Now, the 53-man roster for the Chiefs also includes Derek Noddy, and Derek Noddy has a 1.21 RAS score. That is not good. 1.21 out of 10 would be, as it were, a failing grade. Not a whole lot of positives for Derek Nottie outside of weight, at least as far as the physical tools are concerned. And I think so. Brett Veach has done a very good job in his tenure as a general manager with hedging bets, right? So you saw him sign Jalen Moore at the offensive tackle position. It was a decent move and one that he backed up with a rookie selection at the pick in the first round with Joshua Simmons. That has kind of been Brett Veach's MO during his entire tenure. If you have a glaring hole on the roster, you do something in free agency, and then you do your best in the draft. The defensive tackle spot is you're playing craps when you're playing with drafting defensive tackles in the NFL because a lot of them don't pan out. It's a very, very, very difficult position as far as you have to have all of the technique, you have to have all of the size, you have to have all of the tools to excel at that position. It is very rare that you find someone in the NFL who is a Warren Sapp, who's a little bit shorter, but still becomes a Hall of Famer, right? So all of the stuff has to be working for you to excel at the position, and most of the stuff has to be working for you in order for you to be serviceable at the position. So it's a very, very difficult position, and we are seeing the Chiefs take a lot of swings at that position. That is not a bad sign, in my opinion. It is a good sign because it means that the Chiefs are still trying. They have not given up and said, well, let's just roll a couple of fat bodies out there and hope that they can stop the run. That has not been their MO. They have attempted to address the glaring hole next to Chris Jones time and time again, but you see that short shuttle there, an agility number that is not particular, not one-for-one translation to rushing the passer in the NFL, but it does help when you have that type of agility. 4.62, that's a good number. A lot of guys do not participate in these drills because bad numbers send you way down the boards. Jerry Tillery has an elite score there, a 4.33 versus the 4.62 for Zacch Pickens. But then we get down to Derek Nottie, and Derek Nottie is not going to do very much for you in that department. A 4.97 at the Pro Day, 5.02 at the Combine. That is a score of 0.76, which translates very strongly to his lack of pass rush in the NFL. Now, in my opinion, if Derek Nottie were 6'3", 340, he would be a much more valuable defensive tackle in the NFL if he had his same skill set. Not what he is. He's 6'1", 317. So he's a good run stopper. Maybe he's not a run stuffer. He's not somebody who's going to cause an ever-loving pile at the defensive tackle position. But Zacch Pickens, in his NFL career, has just 3 starts, but has played in 26 games. He has a sack and a half to his name. He has 2 QB hits as a rookie, 2 QB hits as a sophomore in the NFL. Then you look at, he's very consistent here. 1 tackle for loss each year, 11 assisted tackles each year, 9 solos as a rookie, 8 solos last year. That gives him a 20 and 19 total, half sack as a rookie, 1 sack last year. So he is someone that is consistent at those spots, or at that spot across those stats. You see Derek Nottie through all 7 years has 8 hits on the quarterback. Zacch Pickens has 4 in just 2 seasons. Derek Nottie had a massive 2021, and we're going to get to 2020 and 2021 when we talk about Jerry Tillery, but 5 quarterback hits in 2021 and kind of just nothing else the rest of his career. He has a 34 tackle average across 17 games, not per season, but across 17 games. It's a different way of doing it. Then you have 26 here from Zacch Pickens. So are you willing to trade a few tackles in the run game for a difference of 0.7 sacks to 1 sack? 1 QB hit per season versus 2 QB hits per season. Are you willing to trade 1 tackle for loss for 1 tackle for loss? I think you're willing to do that with Derek Nottie. who I think might not be long for the NFL on the Chiefs this season, at least for the 53. And when we're looking at these, it's actually really comparable. Derek Nottie played 221 snaps last season. Zacch Pickens played 228. So this type of productivity, and he played it across 9 games as well. So this type of productivity is kind of, you can look across these 2 seasons and compare them pretty standardly. 19 tackles in those 228 snaps versus 11 tackles in those 221 snaps. So I think Zacch Pickens has Derek Nottie's number as far as the physical tools are concerned. Zacch Pickens is going to add a little bit of pop in the pass game, maybe a little bit less run support. But Jerry Tillery, again, should not be undersold. Jerry Tillery played 467 snaps last year, ended up with 28 tackles, 3 quarterback hits, 1 tackle for loss, and 2 pass deflections. So you're looking at a guy in Jerry Tillery who is a little bit more active across the board. And if we go back to 2020 and 2021, he had in each of those seasons 14 quarterback hits. This might be what the Chiefs were looking at when they decided to move on from Mike Pennel. Jerry Tillery is able to, I think he's looked competent versus the run, and I think that he has added more pop in the pass rush department than you would ever have gotten from Mike Pennel. I wanted Mike Pennel on the roster too. I like Mike Pennel. So as far as making thumbnails for YouTube is concerned, Mike Pennel pops. He is such a large man that it is a good-looking thumbnail when you can put him on there. Jerry Tillery, not so much, right? Jerry Tillery doesn't have quite the pop for thumbnails as Mike Pennel. But I think what you're looking at is exactly what Brett Veach talked about, trying to get younger at the defensive tackle position. Jerry Tillery, 28, the same age as Derek Nottie, but you get up to Zacch Pickens, and this is his 25-year age season. So he does have a lot of football left ahead of him if he is able to get on that roster. I'm very impressed with Zacch Pickens. We'll get into a little bit later why, but I think that this is a move that will strengthen the Chiefs. He is not someone who has earned particularly much playing time thus far in his career. So this morning's video, we talked about the special teams and how you don't want to have Chris Jones out there on special teams, and he doesn't. You don't want to have Charles Omenihu out there on special teams, and he doesn't. You would like to have less George Karlaftis on special teams. You would like to have less of your starters on special teams. Well, Pickens plays special teams. Zacch Pickens plays special teams. Last year, he had 42 snaps of special teams, but he's not earned very much defensive time through his career. 264 snaps as a rookie, 228 snaps last year, taking a small step back, but starting 3 games. That's not a lot of tread on the tires, and it would be troubling to look at if you weren't taking into account a whole lot of the context for the Bears defense. Derek Nottie, for what it's worth, has played substantially more in his career. He has 3,063 total defensive snaps, often playing prior to last season 400-plus snaps. So one nearly 600 snap season in his sophomore campaign in the NFL, 599, but a lot of 400s there. 448 as a rookie, 459 his third year, 450 his fourth year, 498 in 2023. So a lot of playing time for Derek Nottie, but it hasn't really translated to a whole lot of statistical production. A whole lot of statistical production is not really the best sign for a defensive tackle. It's whether or not he was on the field, whether or not he was being double teamed, things like that, things that don't show up in the stat sheet, but the stat sheet does still show you something. And I'm picking on Derek Nottie a little bit in this video. I did not expect the Chiefs to get back into the Derek Nottie business, But I do not mean it to be diminutive. I mean it because the Kansas City Chiefs are trying to get better at defensive tackle, and Derek Nottie is a return to static for the defense of the Kansas City Chiefs for the defensive tackle position. Derek Nottie is a return to what they were last year. Zacch Pickens is not, and that comes as much with the athletic profile as it does with anything else. The athletic profile for Zacch Pickens is much closer to Jerry Tillery, is much closer to Chris Jones than it is Derek Nottie, than it is Mike Pennel. So I think that if the goal is to get more multiple across that defensive line, to get to a place where you are more athletic, where you are able to do more stunts, where you are able to do more twists, things like that, then Zacch Pickens helps you in a way that not only does Derek Nottie not help you, but I don't think that Mike Pennel does either. So on this 2025 Chiefs team, I said I was picking on Derek Nottie a little bit. Well, that's because Chris Jones isn't going anywhere. Omar Norman-Lott isn't going anywhere, even if perhaps he is going to be limited early in the season with an injury. Jerry Tillery has some promise, so maybe he isn't going anywhere either. If you are Zacch Pickens, you have your eye on Jerry Tillery because he is the guy who played 0 snaps for the Chiefs last year, but has played in his NFL career quite a few snaps. But I think that you are looking at this roster thinking Jerry Tillery is the fourth man. I think it might be Derek Nottie. The more I think about it, I know the Chiefs traded for him. I know he knows the defense. I know he is a guy that can be counted on to do what Derek Nottie does. But what Derek Nottie does is kind of just stop the run, is kind of just occupy a blocker. So I think that is what we might have in store is Derek Nottie being the odd man out at this defensive tackle position. Now, as we talked about earlier as well, the 2024 Chiefs defensive tackle snaps, they had just 4 players take snaps the entire season. Marlon Tuipulotu with 61, Derek Nottie with 221, and then you had Chris Jones with 771 and Tershawn Wharton with 667. Now, Karlaftis is going to play some defensive tackle snaps. Omenihu's going to play some defensive tackle snaps. Things are going to be different in that way, but roughly this is what we're looking at. 4 players. I think it's going to be more than 4 players in the 2025 season. I do think Derek Nottie is going to be on the field for the Chiefs week 1, week 2, probably week 3 until maybe someone works up off of this practice squad. And Zacch Pickens, Zacch Pickens is the more overall impressive defensive tackle. He'll hear Broderick Martin from the recently signed bevy of defensive line help might be the most adept to stopping the run, right? So if you're looking for a one-to-one translation, Broderick Martin is the Derek Nottie of these signed players, and Zacch Pickens is the Jerry Tillery of these signed players. I don't think that is exactly what you're going to be looking at for someone earning the playing time at the bottom of the defensive tackle roster. Do I like Zacch Pickens more than Marlon Tuipulotu and his 61 snaps last season? Indeed, I do. Do I like Zacch Pickens more than Derek Nottie's 221 snaps? I think I might. If you had traded before last season Derek Nottie 1-for-1 for Zacch Pickens, I think the defense would have been in a better position. Now, coming out of college, NFL.com graded Zacch Pickens a 6.24, which translates to will eventually be an average starter. He was projected to have a second or third round status. We did indeed see him right in the middle there at pick 64, the final pick of the second, or the first pick of the third round, right? Because the Dolphins forfeited their first rounder. So the overview from Lance Zierlein was a comparison to Maurice Hurst. And he said this: athletic interior defender with experience and length as a gap control tackle, but the quickness and play traits that might be better suited to attacking upfield. Pickens has a disruptive first step that creates advantages for him both as a run defender and a pass rusher. He plays with harmonious hands and feet to elude blockers or play off them. We've seen that in the NFL. But he's likely to get moved around by NFL drive blockers. We've seen that in the NFL. Pickens has the ability to play both tackle spots in a one-gapping front and has rotational value with the potential to see starters reps. I think that you are looking at someone who can be a starter in the NFL. You were looking at someone who, as far as the tape in the NFL is concerned, I think is more impressive than Derek Nottie, but is not as consistent as Derek Nottie. Derek Nottie entered the NFL basically as a whole-made product. Derek Nottie entered the NFL and has not really changed, has not gotten better, I don't think, at many things, but hasn't gotten worse. He's 28 years old. He's entering his 29-year-old season in the NFL. Remarkably consistent with the exception of last season where he fell off from a snaps perspective. But that alone is kind of troubling. Don't you think that the Kansas City Chiefs would have liked to had someone that could take Chris Jones off the field a few more reps per game, someone that could have taken Tershawn Wharton off of the field for a few more reps per game? I think they would have. Derek Nottie did not get that accomplished. Marlon Tuipulotu certainly did not get that accomplished. Upon his draft, we have this from Bears Wire. Instant analysis of Bears' 64th overall pick, defensive tackle Zacch Pickens, by Nate Atkins from US Today Sports. The Chicago Bears selected South Carolina defensive tackle Zacch Pickens with the 64th overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, adding their second defensive lineman of day two. After having the second worst run defense last year, Chicago strengthened in the trenches, adding Pickens with the first pick of the third round. The South Carolina defensive tackle is an explosive one-gap run defender and upgrades the interior of the Bears defense. I think he will do that in Kansas City as well. So the question is, why isn't he a Bear anymore? If he could not make the roster for the Chicago Bears, what are the odds that he can make the 53 for the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been to 3 consecutive Super Bowls? I don't know if you have heard that lately, and a lot of AFC Championship games as well. I don't know if you've thought about that lately as well. But Grady Jarrett and Gervon Dexter, I can never remember, are their starters. Those are both solid starters at defensive tackle. Shamar Turner and Andrew Billings are the backups, and guys, they're pretty good as well. I think that both of these players, Grady Jarrett and Gervon Dexter, would be the second starting defensive tackle for the Chiefs, especially in the absence of Omar Norman-Lott. Shamar Turner and Andrew Billings might as well be the second defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. Chris Williams, that's the big question there. Is he not better than Chris Williams? Who knows, right? You're looking at the bottom end of a roster. Who knows when you're talking about ticky-tack there? But I think that Zacch Pickens is good in pursuit. He is someone that you see scrape down the line and make tackles a lot that way. That is something that I don't think you see the mobility from Derek Nottie really to do. He's not been a particularly mobile defensive tackle. I think that you see him make the tackle a lot when the play is designed right at Derek Nottie. And that's okay. That's what you have to do. But I don't think he offers a lot of support outside of that one spot. We have seen Zacch Pickens with the mobility to do that. I think that he has a pretty good motor. I don't think that he has an Ashton Gelati motor, but I think that he does stay active on the field, and he does get offensive linemen probably into trouble a lot in the film room because the offensive lineman doesn't know where the play is. So sometimes an offensive lineman says, well, I'm 330 pounds. That was enough for today, and doesn't know that the play is still developing behind him. Zacch Pickens doesn't stop on those plays. He has engaged and won against double teams at the NFL level. That is promising. You're going to be counted on to have to do that sometimes in the NFL, right? And something you're not going to get a whole lot of credit for. There's a center and a guard on you. The running back is coming at you as well. You have to make that play. He does that at least often enough. And the good news there is he's not going to have to do that lining up next to Chris Jones. Chris Jones is going to draw those double teams. And if you're talking about a one-on-one situation with an offensive lineman, I trust Zacch Pickens to be able to make that play. The final note here, I can easily imagine Zacch Pickens on the 53-man roster for the Kansas City Chiefs. I can easily imagine, so if Zack Pickens had done the training camp here, right, if he had been a part of this team prior to just now, and Omar Norman-Lott was in threat of missing the game week 1 against the Chargers, I would trust Zack Pickens to be that second defensive tackle. Is he going to be a world changer? Is he going to show the pop that Omar Norman-Lott showed in college? I don't think so. If Zack Pickens were in this year's draft and he were available when the Chiefs selected Omar Norman-Lott, this is one way to think about it, right? I think they still would have taken Omar Norman-Lott. Zack Pickens has shown that he can be a decent to good defensive tackle. Omar Norman-Lott has shown the promise that he could be a really good defensive tackle. Not so much in training camp, but based on their college footage, if this were the draft right now. Pickens, I think, will be on the 53 this season. So that is one way to look at this. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, hitting a like button really does help me out. The Chiefs are the only thing I talk about here. There will be videos on Ethan Downs. There will be videos on Davis. There will be videos on all of the players that the Chiefs picked up today, but I don't know if that is going to be today or tomorrow. So keep an eye open for that on your screen now. 2 playlists and a video that YouTube thinks you will like because you have been here. And you kind of like me, right?